Good morning, everyone. I'm going to present the updates on the Social Services Cluster on behalf of Secretary Dinky Suliman. While the Social Services Cluster, which is being led by DSWD with members including DepEd, Department of Health, DNR, HLURB, NCIP, TESDA, and CHED, we are so busy also with the other disasters that occur after Yolanda, but I would like to emphasize that we never leave the Typhoon Yolanda affected area. So we're there while we're also in the other areas affected by the other hazards. The cluster is pleased to inform you that education and health services are in full swing. The restoration of these services, which are very vital to the community life in areas affected by Yolanda, are now much better because of the climate change resiliency consideration that are included in the design and construction of shelter units, school buildings, health centers, and other government infrastructure. So the following is a short presentation of the cluster, which focuses on the major accomplishments of the social services. I would like to highlight the health security provided or ensured in the areas affected through the delivery of priority medical programs and projects for the communities and sectors with vulnerabilities affected by Typhoon Yolanda. So the slide also presents the different accomplishments by the Department of Health. Number one is being cited already by DPWH. 39% is the overall accomplishment for the new building, the Eastern Visayas Medical Center. Now, in the slide, there's one number omitted, that of DepEd. The procurement and delivery of books and learning materials are in various stages, and these are, even with the issues encountered by the agency on procurement, these are proceeding in the schedule that had been agreed upon during the cluster meetings. The next slide presents to us the health security and protection through provision of emergency shelter assistance. So it's not only the health, it's not only the education, but ensuring that affected families are provided with assistance to immediately repair the damaged shelter units, but with consideration of the location in safe areas. So emergency shelter assistance targeted 1,028,329 families, and so far as of yesterday, we have accomplished 96% of the entire target. So 987,545 families with either totally or partially damaged shelter units in safe location had now been provided with the emergency shelter. The next accomplishment is not in terms of figures, but in terms of coordination. This is the most challenging part in most of our activities and project implementation. So again, coordination, coordination, coordination. So we have brought down the social services cluster activities to the regions and the provincial level. So our partners coming from the UN, the international organizations, and intergovernmental organizations, including that of local NGOs, the local government units had been actively participating in the delivery of the social services activities, projects, and interventions. For emergency shelter assistance, I would like to highlight, earlier Secretary Abad had presented to us that 22.9 billion had been released to the SWD, and 20.01 billion of this had been used for the emergency shelter. So the other 2 billion were spent for livelihood, for the repair of our residential centers for children, women, and abused sectors or sectors with vulnerabilities. That's why we have 20.01 billion for emergency shelter assistance. So the slide presents the target number of families, as I mentioned earlier, and the total amount that had been disbursed so far. Please don't be surprised why 18 billion only. Majority of the remaining amount had been, it's almost 100% had been already released to the local government units, but the process of disbursing directly to the beneficiaries had been undertaken and in various level of implementation by the partner local government units, which entered a memorandum of agreement with us for the implementation of emergency shelter assistance. The next slide, I would like to highlight this. While this is not funded under the CRRP or the Comprehensive Recovery and Rehabilitation Plan for Yolanda, the community-driven development type of approach in implementing projects in Typhoon Yolanda affected areas had been very successful. I would like to highlight that through the CDD, 13,876 projects had been funded through the partnership with financial institutions such as the World Bank and ADB. Then we have completed 2,887, and this all benefits 3,268,680 families. So you'll just imagine what the communities had decided to alleviate and to ensure that the Building Back Better principle using the community-driven development approach had been implemented in areas affected. So the next slide is an enumeration of the priority, the top 10 projects that had been implemented using the community-driven development model. So roads, usually farm to market, the flood control, or the river control in areas that are along waterways or shorelines, community center and multipurpose center, footpath, foot trail, access trail, particularly in remote or going to remote barangays. Then electrification and lighting in areas where there were reported outages during the early part of Yolanda recovery. The electrification project had been implemented in these communities. School buildings, repair and new construction. The water system, also repair and new installation of pipes. Daycare centers and the health stations, upgrading and new construction. The next slides are snapshots of what we were implementing also together with the other partners and members of the social services cluster. So in partnership with the DPWH, this is part of, if you recall, the typology of shelter. We have the emergency shelter, we have the transition shelter and the bunk houses to prepare and to provide the families without shelter units before they proceed or transfer to permanent resettlement sites. So we have to provide transition shelter and also bunk houses, management of which included provision of safety and protection interventions, as well as health and even continuing education for children. The next slide, in coordination with the National Housing Authority and IOM, we're able to provide temporary solution to the condition in the resettlement sites where families need to be provided with water. So the donation that we received from the Nigerian government, this is indeed, while we're saying the donation is late in terms of its coming, but it's timely because we need the assistance to support the temporary solution to shelter. So we provided water tanks to families who transferred already to resettlement sites, permanent sites in Reeds View, Villa Sofia, and Villa Diana, all in Tacloban City. So the next set of pictures are that of permanent shelter in partnership with the HADSI, the UN Habitat. We also participated, the sector also participated in providing shelter units, permanent shelter units, particularly to areas that are not covered under the permanent resettlement housing project of the National Housing Authority. So we have in Region 4B, particularly Palawan, Region 6 in Iloilo and neighboring provinces, and Region 8 in Leyte and Eastern Samar. So we have 152.81 million worth of shelter for implementation of permanent dwellings of the Yolanda affected families. For the major challenges, this had not been a major one already, because we're assured during our last meeting with the cluster that their releases or their funds will be released integrated to their regular budget in 2016. So for the time being, while waiting for 2016 to continue with their planned activities, its LURB had started doing the upgrading of the comprehensive land use plan. This started already, the preparatory work. So full implementation will be in 2016. The NCIP for emergency shelter assistance for IP communities that were devastated and are within the safe areas, we also included, so that the issues in providing ESA or emergency shelter to IP families had been resolved already in coordination with the local government units and the National Commission for the Indigenous Peoples. Number two has not been, has not waned, meaning this had been a continuing issue in newspaper and in other modalities of communication. Lots of local government units would want everyone, all the families affected in their municipality, to be covered by the emergency shelter assistance. However, it's very clear that we only can cover those in safe areas so as to encourage them to transfer, particularly families residing in very unsafe or those that are within the waterways or directly in the path of storm surges, high winds, landslide, or rock slide. So we encourage them. So only those that are residing in safe areas are covered by the emergency shelter assistance. So that ends the presentation of the social services cluster. And to the members of the cluster, thank you very much for sharing the inputs. Good morning po.